So, we're diving into this fascinating discussion about Mary's perpetual virginity and the contradictions in the gospel texts, right?
Absolutely. It's a compelling issue. It's wild how millions of Christians hold on to the idea that Mary never had, any other children. Yet the Gospels plainly list Jesus' brothers and sisters.
Exactly. I mean, take Mark, written around 70 CE, and there's no mention at all of a virgin birth. He just says Jesus is the son of Mary, and that his siblings are present in Nazareth.
Yep, right. Then by the time Matthew and Luke come along around 80 to 90 CE, we suddenly have the miraculous conception narrative, where Mary conceives by the Holy Spirit. It's like a complete shift in the storytelling.
It really makes you ask, was this a theological upgrade, or maybe a literary invention that served a specific purpose for later Christian communities?
Yeah, definitely. And the early debates were intense. Helvidius, for instance, argued basically that those siblings were, indeed, Mary's actual children.
Right. Helvidius was so clear about it, saying, the text is clear. But then Jerome steps in and counters by saying that these siblings were actually Joseph's children from a previous marriage.
Yeah. And then you have Epiphanius of Salamis, who brings in the idea that they were actually cousins, since the Aramaic word could mean both siblings and cousins. Each explanation has its own twist.
Exactly. It's like, they've all tried to patch up the textual contradictions with their own theological agendas.
What's interesting is how these interpretations really shaped Christian theology. Perpetual virginity wasn't just a quirky detail. It established Mary as a symbol of divine purity, like a cosmic contrast to earthly desires.
Yeah, it's like, if Mary's womb is sacred and never used for mortal birth afterwards, it makes her this untouchable, transcendent figure. It kind of elevates her status to something extraordinary.
Absolutely. But then there's the angle of the Protoevangelium of James, which takes things to a whole other level. It imagines Mary being raised in the temple, fed by angels, and even vows perpetual virginity while under the care of an old widowed Joseph.
It's like this elaborate mythological narrative, right? It conveniently solves the brothers' problem by making them Joseph's children from before. It's a neat trick, but at the same time, it's clearly more myth than historical fact.
Yeah, but, some might argue that every myth serves a purpose. The idea of perpetual virginity really set a cosmic line between the divine and the human. It literally redefined ideas of sin, sex, and womanhood for nearly 2 millennia.
Absolutely, and that's something that still has ripple effects today. The doctrine influenced not just theology, but also how societies viewed the sanctity and purity of women.
Now here's a thought. Do you think that the change in narrative between Mark and the later Gospels was a conscious effort to protect the sanctity of Jesus' divinity by ensuring Mary remained untarnished by ordinary biology?
That's a really good question. It does seem plausible that early communities, desperate to preserve the idea of the divine, might have felt the need to upgrade Mary's status. And if you think about it, the Gospel writers of Matthew and Luke, written decades later, are already in a different theological context.
Yeah, I can see that. But, I have to respectfully challenge that point for a second. Isn't it possible that this evolution wasn't so much a deliberate upgrade as it was a reflection of emerging theological understanding? Like early Christians were still figuring out what it meant for Jesus to be both divine and human.
That's fair. And I agree to an extent. It might not be a simple case of deliberate fabrication, but rather an evolution in storytelling as theological and doctrinal concerns changed over time.
Exactly. And it shows how dynamic early Christian thought was. Different factions, like the Gnostics, even had their own takes. Some claiming Jesus was fully human, others arguing he just appeared human.
Right, with groups like the Ebionites insisting on Jesus' full humanity and the Docetists arguing he was only an illusion. It's like the same story, but with radically different spins depending on the
Yeah.
audience.
And then, of course, by the 5th century, the Council of Ephesus officially crowned Mary Theotokos, cementing her as the Mother of God. That political and doctrinal decision made any questioning of her virginity almost taboo.
It really was, a turning point. Once she was hailed as Theotokos, any deviation threatened the robustness of the whole divine narrative. It's like the early church built an entire identity around her purity.
It's fascinating how a single doctrine could shape centuries of theology and even impact conceptions of femininity in broader culture.
Absolutely. Think about it. If Mary was seen as an ideal, untouched by normal human experience, then every other mother was, inevitably seen as lesser. It created this binary between divine womanhood and human womanhood.
Yeah, that's a deep societal impact. Now, what about the simplest reading of the Greek text that literally says, his brothers and sisters? Scholars like Bart Ehrman and John P. Meyer argue that you take it at face value.
Right. They point out that if you read Mark or even Matthew literally, it just means that Jesus had full siblings. Nothing too fancy. It's like the simplest explanation. But then theologians such as Raymond Brown countered that early Christian communities had a genuine need to safeguard Jesus' divinity, so they started reinterpreting those texts.
It really is a clash between a kind of plain literalism and the need for a more protective narrative. And both angles have their own logic, don't they?
Exactly. Both camps have valid points. On the one hand, literal readings support a straightforward historical perspective. On the other, the symbolic reinterpretations reflect the psychological and cultural needs of a developing faith.
And it gets even more intricate when you consider the role of language. I mean, using the same Aramaic term for brother and cousin really muddied the waters, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's like, language can be so ambiguous, and that provided a perfect opening for reinterpretation. Epiphanius used that to push his cousin theory, which is interesting because it shows how much interpretation is tied to linguistic nuances.
And then there's the whole narrative in the Protoevangelium of James. That text, dating around 150 CE, really ramps things up by giving Mary an entirely different backstory. One steeped in miraculous elements, like angelic feeding and temple upbringing.
Yeah, it's like, the text transforms her from a regular Jewish girl into this legendary, almost saint-like figure whose life is entirely mythologized.
And that mythologizing has had lasting effects. Even today, the idea of Mary as pure and untouchable influences not just theology, but art, culture, and women's roles in religious narratives.
Exactly. It's not just history, it's a blueprint for understanding divine femininity. And, it raises questions about how myth and history interweave to produce lasting cultural symbols.
Right. But here's something that still bugs me. With such a rich array of theories, Helvidius's, Jerome's, Epiphanius's, and the Protoevangelium narrative, how do we even decide which perspective is closest to the truth?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I mean, none of these theories are fully provable. They all come from different theological and cultural agendas. It's like trying to, piece together a jigsaw puzzle when many pieces are missing or deliberately altered.
Exactly. And maybe the real truth isn't one fixed historical fact, but rather a tapestry of evolving interpretations. That, in itself, tells us something about how we understand divine mysteries.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that history, theology, and myth are deeply intertwined. The question of Mary's perpetual virginity might never have a clear-cut answer, but it certainly opens up a broader inquiry into how belief systems evolve.
Yeah, indeed. And that's what makes this topic so endlessly fascinating. A debate that not only reaches back nearly 2,000 years, but also continues to influence our modern views on identity and divinity.
Yep, it shows that these stories aren't just old tales. They reshape our worldviews in ways we're only beginning to understand. Thanks for this deep dive. It's been eye-opening.
Thanks for the conversation. I think it's safe to say that questioning these historical narratives can really change how we see the past and even the present